It is 1:02. I would like to introduce our speaker. It's going to be James R. Morgan III. He's a graduate of Howard University in Washington, D.C. He also completed his undergraduate studies there in communications and Africana studies. He's a recipient of the 2019 Charles H. Wesley Medal of History, a 2020 Phyllis Wheatley Book Award for nonfiction biography, and a 2021 International OGS, which is the Afro-American Historical Genealogical Book Award. He is an active Prince Hall Freemason. As such, he serves as worshipful grand historian and archivist of the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of District of Columbia. He's authored several scholarly writings on African-American Freemasonry, fraternalism, and genealogy. He is also an honorary fellow and life member of the Research Society. James is an experienced genealogist whom I've had the pleasure of knowing for well over 10 years. He's a member of the OGS chapter out of Washington, D.C. called James Dent Walker. He's presented at various conferences and institutes across the country. And also he's a co-panelist on Black Pro-Gen Live and the Prince Hall Think Tank, both of which can be found on YouTube. He's currently employed with the United States Department of State and serves as the curatorial consultant with the African American Civil War Museum in DC, and also a consultant with the International African American Museum here in Charleston. So James, I am going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to you so you can start your presentation. One more note for the people that are in attendance. If you have questions, please use the Q&A box. I'm monitoring as much as I can to be able to see those, and we'll have James address those questions at the end. Again, thank you for coming, and James, you are welcome to go from here.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. I really appreciate that. I know that some of the parlance of fraternalism can be new to us when we're speaking on it for
absolutely
time and whatnot. And I want to commend you for doing the best job so far of anybody in trying to pronounce the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. I know for people who are not in that.
I thought about that. You know, thank you.
I know for a lot of folks, if you're not in those type of circles, it can be a bit of a tongue twister. And trust me, having just left from a council of deliberation, which most of you probably have no idea what that means, but I literally left from a council of deliberation meeting to make sure I was online on time for this. And trust me, when I see people get on the microphone and try to introduce themselves, sometimes we trick our own selves when we try to make those introductions. But thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for registering. Of course, I want to give honor to the leadership of the International African American Museum as well. I'm really enjoying my first couple of weeks working with everybody, and I'm really excited to be talking with you all about a subject that not only that one that I study, but one that I live. Just as a side note, I don't work for the Department of State anymore. I apologize. I should have sent a more updated bio, and so I apologize about that. But I also want to let everybody know that the Phylactis Research Society, which I'm a part of, named me as their 2022 Man of the Year just about a month ago. And a big part of the reason why is because one of the things that I've tried to do over the course of now, as you said, over 10 years, is really try to meld the worlds of Black fraternalism and genealogy, and more recently, including cemetery preservation, which we're not going to talk too much about that today, but they're very important. They're very important topics separately, and I think that when we combine them, as you will hopefully learn today, they really can open up new avenues of historical research and inquiry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over here to the visuals, And you all should be able to see my my slideshow there. Yes, no?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So the title of our presentation is Finding Our Fathers, Prince Hall Freemasonry, Fraternalism, and Genealogy. And we're going to get into what all that means basically right now. So let's understand a little bit about African American genealogy. And for those of you who are somewhat seasoned, some of this may be a little redundant, but for those who are newbies, I hope that you're paying attention. I like to do definitions. That's just my thing. So I define genealogy as the study and tracing of lines of descent or development, typically of family groups or kinship networks. Okay. So you don't just have your own personal bloodline genealogy, but you may have your genealogy of who taught you the craft that you are an expert in. Maybe if you're a martial artist, maybe you like to cook, maybe it may not necessarily be a family member that taught you how to fix a car, but somebody taught you and somebody taught them. So that's also part of your genealogy as well. We use public and private records as modern researchers, and by doing so, we can make great progress in our work by tracing our own family histories as well as that of our research subjects. So we know that as genealogists, we don't just do our own family history a lot of times. A lot of times you're researching for your friends, for distant relatives. And if you really want to get deep with it, like I like to do, and I'm sure Dr. Murphy likes to do, we like to get into the community research and research everybody in the neighborhood, the next town over, maybe the next county over, right? So that's what we do as genealogists. Today, we understand that genealogy is indeed a multi-billion-dollar industry with all the guidebooks and multimedia programming and subscription services and webinars like this one, right? Somebody has to keep the lights on, and fortunately, the genealogy industry has been able to do that, and we've been able to progress this art and this science quite a bit over the past few decades. I want to note that the field of African American genealogy and genealogy in particular in the United States really got a major injection of energy with the publication of Roots, which later, of course, became a very popular television show. This is going on during the period where the American Bicentennial was being celebrated. And of course, we can't forget Alex Haley's other family novel, Queen, which talked about the other side of his family, which I believe was his father's side as well. So I always like to highlight that because a lot of times, in my view, Alex Haley kind of gets forgotten about in some ways, kind of like Black fraternalism. And oh, by the way, Alex Haley happened to have been a fraternalist. He happened to have been a Prince Hall Mason. And for those who don't know what that means, you're going to find out momentarily. So yeah, moving forward. So here's just some basic tips for tracing your own family. Again, for those who are somewhat seasoned, you probably already know this and are already doing it. But for our newbies, remember to well start writing down what you already know or what you already believe that you know. I always tell people that you should interview people older than yourself, preferably the oldest people in your family, grandma, grandpa, etc., as much as possible and as soon as possible. I had the unfortunate pleasure. I actually interviewed my great grandfather 7 years to the day before he passed. I had no idea that day that he only had 7 years left to live, but I thank God every day that I did interview him. And so I encourage you all, if you have elders in your families, make sure you do the same. As much as possible, you want to collect documentation that verifies what you already believe to be established facts, because guess what? You may find out that all is not what it seems. Mom and grandma might not be mom and grandma. They might be auntie, might be cousin. Daddy might not be daddy. So we want to try to verify these established facts as much as possible, not to try to change relationships per se, but if anything, we want to enhance the relationships that may already exist. So we're not out here to try to hurt anybody, okay? We want to utilize records such as census, tax records, probate records, Freedmen's Bureau files, etc. And today we're going to be talking about a very specific type of data set in fraternal records, but these are some of the more commonly used ones as well. We already know about online tools such as Ancestry.com and Family Search and Fold3 and those type of fun websites that we can go to. And I want you to remember, researching the kinship relationship of your Masonic and fraternal ancestors can open up new avenues of information on their personal lives and careers. And we're going to get into some examples of that. So let's understand a little bit about fraternalism. What is it? Its various forms. how do we, what is this stuff that Mr. Morgan's going to talk about today? Well, today fraternal organizations are something that have fallen into distant memory for many Americans, aside from college fraternities. The very idea of a fraternal order has all but been forgotten in the modern American society. It's my contention that these organizations provide a unique, hidden, and often fascinating look into the lives of deceased ancestors and communities. As during their heyday, they often attracted the best minds of their local communities, and very often their record books have left tantalizing but often ignored pieces of history that can be used for genealogy, African American genealogy more specifically. So for most people who were born, I would say in my mother's generation or thereabouts, in the 19, blah, 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 blah. For most people from that era, this is the lasting image of a fraternal organization. For those who watch the Flintstones, you know that every couple episodes, Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble, they would go out to the Loyal Order of the Water Buffalo, which was their fraternal order there in Bedrock. And when they were there, you have to think about the type of imagery that was shown. They would wear these funny looking hats, funny regalia. They go off to their little clubhouse, and basically it was portrayed as a little boy's clubhouse for grown men. Okay, they go there, they crack jokes, they play games, they engage in all types of debauchery and buffoonery. They look at girly magazines and girly films and what have you, and just basically act like immature children. This image and this kind of stereotype actually has lasted through the decades, even down to my generation, with images like this one of the stonecutters from an episode of the Flintstones. Again, the idea is that fraternal organizations make themselves out to be these really, really super secret clubhouses with Dakota rings and secret handshakes that really don't mean anything, and they're not doing anything for the community at large and don't really have any historical or sociological value. Today is my hope that I can help dispel this myth. If this is one that you've been exposed to, through showing you some of the real history and how it has value for your own personal research. So let's start at the beginning of the American Republic. Okay, this image, if you can see my mouse, the image of these gentlemen in parade. The image of the gentleman on parade here on your left is actually an image of the Alexandria Lodge number 22, which is today known as Alexandria Washington Lodge number 22. That lodge was actually the second lodge that none other than President George Washington was a member of. He first took his Masonic degrees. He joined the Masonic order at the age of 21 in Fredericksburg Lodge number 4 in Fredericksburg, Virginia, but later moved his membership to this lodge in Alexandria. He also served as master of that lodge, and at his death, the lodge appended his name to their name, and they also performed Masonic funeral rites and escorted his body to its place of burial at the Mount Vernon plantation. Now, on the other side, you see an image clearly of men of African descent, dressed in very similar regalia, holding banners and whatnot, very similar to what the first image is. However, these men, of course, one picture is of people of European descent, one is of people of African descent. But aside from that, the sociological implications of these two pictures are very different, because these Black men are actually celebrating the passage of the 15th Amendment in a parade in Baltimore, Maryland. Both of these groups are part of the same organization that have a similar related history, in fact, related genealogy. However, the actions and the story of the two different groups really follows what happens in America at large, which is you have one America, one white. Well, you have two Americas, one white, one Black. And so this is what happens. And while fraternal organizations may exist in the two different communities, my contention is that they've actually served two very different and radical purposes. So what is a fraternal organization? Fraternal organizations can be defined as secular groups of individuals who come together around a unique and usually a secret initiation ritual, an oath ceremony, philosophy, or a guiding principle for the moral and physical uplift of the membership. These organizations typically can be identified by a unique manner of dress with regalia, so we've already seen some examples of that. Members are expected to have a unique bond or a code of conduct and relationship to each other to create a sense of friendship, brotherly or sisterly love, etc. This code takes complete strangers and makes them into brothers and sisters in a way that is unique to the society, the benefits of which are not to be shared with outsiders. So the idea is that, I'm a member of the Stonecutters. Let's just say I'll use the example from the Flintstones. And you are a member of the Stonecutters. Now, I became a member of the Stonecutters in New York. You became a member of the Stonecutters in Arizona. But if we meet at an airport and we both realize we're part of the same club, now we recognize that there are certain things that I will or will not do in your presence. I won't steal from you. Maybe if I apply to you for some form of charity and say, hey, I'm in a tight spot, you recognize that you're obligated to assist me, and I'm obligated to maybe pay you back at the appropriate time. I mean, these are the type of examples of things that were going on, and that still do to this day, believe it or not. But the question is, do you have the secret decoder ring? Do you have the secret handshake? Do you know the right password, etc.? Okay. Typically, these organizations function off of a charter system, which in of itself forms a sort of family tree. So the idea, again, is that if I'm a member of the Stonecutters, my lodge, my chapter, my consistory, my tent, whatever, these are just various forms of names to say my congregation, right? The idea that we have a proper authority to function from, whether it's a Grand Lodge of the state or the Grand Lodge of the country, or they may have different names, but the idea is you have the proper documentation to call yourself a part of this organization. There are people in history, you may find them in your own genealogical journey, who may belong to organizations that didn't necessarily have proper authority to function. And for the organization, that may be a big deal. But for you as a genealogist, whether you're in an organization like this or not, there's still some history there that I would encourage you to research. And if anyone has any more questions about that, I'll be happy to take it during the Q&A. So let's look at the types of fraternal organizations for a second. You have social societies, which are organizations that are based around events or activities, and they have special interests such as tea clubs, salon discussion groups, or maybe even book clubs or debate groups, right? Benevolent societies, which are organized around the idea of charitable giving or eliminating some type of social ill via a particular institutional program, such as maybe having an orphanage or feeding the poor, or maybe funding schools or what have you. Okay, and sometimes these groups do mix and have more than, and can meet more than, and be a part of more than one of these categories. You have ethnic and cultural groups. These are organizations that are created to inspire a sense of national or ethnic pride, usually for immigrant populations. However, nativist organizations have also existed. These orders usually attempt to maintain the mother country's traditions in the new space, while at the same time educate outsiders to the community about their history and customs. Sometimes these groups are branch offshoots of existing organizations, or they are formed out of a need for social and political unity. Okay, so the idea of, you may have an organization that's an Irish group, for Irish immigrants or what have you, right? You may have a group that's formed for people who are coming from Haiti or what have you, but we need to have something so that our children, our community is unified in this new space. Trade unions, okay? These are organizations that are founded based upon a particular occupation. You have mystical and religious societies, which are arguably the most popular type. These organizations are essentially based upon the idea of having some type of interaction with God, some type of interaction with some type of mystical philosophy. The idea of, well, we're really the Knights Templar, and we found some secret treasure, King Solomon's Temple, or maybe we are really the Order of the Amazon. We have some secret history, some secret knowledge from ancient times, right? And if you get this knowledge, you'll be more enlightened to in your interactions day to day. These are the type of things that are taught in these type of organizations. Then you have political societies as well, which are formed around specific political initiatives. And lastly, believe it or not, you even have criminal fraternal societies. More commonly, people may identify them as street gangs, or like the idea of the mafia. A lot of people, if you're not into that type of history, a lot of people don't know that the Italian and Sicilian mafia have an initiation ritual, which is based on fraternalism. The idea of, if you're a member of this particular organization and I'm a member of this organization, we understand that we're going to deal with each other a certain way. There's a famous line in the film Goodfellas, which I won't repeat because this is a family show, but when he talks about, hey, we used to call each other Goodfellas, and we understood how we would interact with each other versus the outside world. Okay. I apologize. I'm having a little technical difficulty. Let me come off screen share for 1 second and come back on.
Yeah, we occasionally it's garbled a little bit, and I don't know if you're on earbuds or just an open mic from your computer.
I am on my AirPods, but I wasn't having an audio issue. I was having a visual issue, and so I'm trying to get that. I'm trying to get that. Just give me one moment to navigate that. And I apologize to the folks at home, but we want to make sure you get all this information the right way. All right, there we go. This should work. All right, and I think we're back in action.
Thank you.
Good. No problem. We are back. All right. So, moving forward, understanding African American fraternalism, resistance through cooperation. The unique set of circumstances that surrounded the arrival of Africans in the Americas created a situation where fraternal organizations served a very unique role in the culture of African Americans. These organizations offered a secluded space that could be attractive to people who were oppressed and prevented from practicing their own religious traditions, as well as being used as places to form ideas about liberation. Okay, so for me, I define Africa in one way as a land of mystic corners. Having been to Africa twice, I'm sure someone out there's been more than me, but I can tell you, especially in West Africa, the idea of initiation, the idea of rites of passage going from childhood to adulthood is something that's very, very sacred there. I myself am a product of a rites of passage program as well back home in New Jersey. I would say that when we say this word mysticism, right? What does that really mean? Mysticism can be defined as an intellectual tradition based upon initiation that teaches the students that there are ways in which we might be able to interact with the spiritual realm while still physically alive. So the idea that we believe in God, but we also believe in our ancestors. We can talk to our ancestors. We can, through certain rituals, we can communicate with them and with God, and that actual things will happen, like the drought will end, or maybe we need less rain. Maybe we need to find out where the food is, or what some other type of question that we have. We can figure that out through these initiation rituals. Two of the most famous organizations in West Africa that fit this criteria are the Plural Society for Men, and then you have the Sunday Society, which are very prominent in the area of Sierra Leone, Liberia, what have you. And so again, you can see these initiates in each of these images here. This knowledge, this type of cultural practice is something that Africans bring on the boats with them to the Americas. And for my money, they continue to try to practice as best they could in various ways. Instead, we're going to focus on the United States, but if you have ancestors in other parts of the Americas, you will see similar cultural trends. So, in 1741, you have the famous New York conspiracy, which was initiated by a group of Africans who came from different ethnic groups. However, they decided that they would come together and they actually formed a pact that they would try to assault the armory in what is today Manhattan Island in order to stage a slave rebellion. The three primary leaders' names were Caesar, Kufi, and Prince. And the thing that was really interesting about this story to me is that each of the members of this conspiracy were members of various African secret societies. Okay. They teamed up with a small group of poor white indentured servants to try to engage in this rebellion. And unfortunately for them, the plan was later discovered, and these leaders were severely executed, as you can see depicted in this image here. Now, what does this have to do with our presentation? What it has to do with the presentation is the fact that these people called themselves the Black Freemasons, and later they took on the name of the Geneva Club. They were not Masons in the sense that you're about to learn about. However, they recognized something in the idea of fraternal and secret societies in terms of being able to use them as a tool for organizing of the community. Okay, so again, this is in 1741 when this is going on, and this is what African people are thinking about. How can we form space to organize? Okay. A generation later, you would have the man on the left with the blue background, Prince Hall. This is an artistic image of him. There's no from life image of Prince Hall. But he, during the American Revolution period, would lead a group of African men in Boston, Massachusetts, to take the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry and form what was known as African Lodge number 459, with Hall as its first master. Okay. This lodge was important because it was the first lodge of, by, and for men of African descent in the United States, as far as the Masonic order goes. Okay. From that one lodge, Prince Hall and these brothers would organize one of the first schools for Black children right out of Prince Hall's home. They would also write several petitions to the Massachusetts legislature requesting that the state of Massachusetts, then the colony, then later the state of Massachusetts, in the slave trade. There are several cases of enslaved people, particularly enslaved women, who petitioned or sued for their freedom that Prince Hall and these brothers actually assisted them with in various ways. Okay. This lodge template, if you will, is one that became very appealing to Blacks in other parts of the country, particularly in Philadelphia with my good friend, the Reverend Absalom Jones, who you see with the red background. You have to think about something for a second. There was a couple of members of the African Lodge who were fishermen who were tricked onto a boat thinking that they were going to do a day's work, but they ended up down in Martinique to be sold in the slave markets there. But when they were able to identify themselves as Masons, and then send home for proof of their having been legally freed people, they were sent back home. So when you think about a film like Solomon Northrop, or a book like Solomon Northrop's 12 Years a Slave, I do wonder, would that story have been a little different had he been a member of one of these organizations? Maybe he would have had a route of escape and been a part of a network, but we'll never know that. Now, that's it with all due respect to Solomon Northrop. Now, Absalom Jones in Pennsylvania ends up becoming a member of the African Lodge, and later he and several others request from Prince Hall a charter so that they themselves can have a Black Masonic Lodge in Pennsylvania. Hall had received a charter from the Grand Lodge of England in the year, which was issued in 1784 and received in 1787, and that charter still exists. From that one document, which authorized him to organize this lodge, nearly all African American Masons descend in some way, shape, or form. So again, there's this idea of genealogy, of a kinship network. And so if anybody's out there researching any ancestors that were Prince Hall Masons, one of the things that would be interesting is to track how their lineage would trace back to Prince Hall in the story that I've just told you. Moving forward, for the ladies, about 100 years later, you've got the Order of the Eastern Star formed right here in Washington, D.C., with Georgiana Hinton Thomas and Thornton A. Jackson. Okay, this is women's orders or women's auxiliaries become a very, very important aspect of Black fraternalism, especially as we move into the 19th century and the 20th century, to the point where, as earlier today, I was at an event this morning, and it was all brothers in the room, and then when the ladies were admitted, there were almost more ladies there than us, right? And it was our event as the men. So we cannot neglect this aspect as well. And so in researching this type of of history, I always recommend to check between the genders as well. And so you'll see this template of Masons have the Eastern Stars. When you look at the Odd Fellows, which you see here with their founder, Peter Ogden, who they also had the Household of Ruth, okay, as their female appendant body. You'll see that time and again. The men have something, the women have something. The women have something, the men have something. And that's a great way to try to track family members across space and time as well. Peter Ogden, who you see here, the founder of the Grand United Order of Odd Fellows in America. He was a member of the Odd Fellows in England, and he, upon arriving in New York, he met with a group of known as the Philomathian Society, who had wanted to become a lodge of Odd Fellows, but were denied by the white Odd Fellows in New York. So what Peter Ogden does is he, again, like Prince Hall, nearly not a century, but about 50 years before him, Peter Ogden is doing this in 1842. In 1843, he receives a charter from the Grand Lodge of the Odd Fellows in New York to establish Philomathian Lodge 646. And from there, the Odd Fellows spread throughout the United States as well, similar to how the story I told you about Prince Hall Masonry. Matter of fact, you will see a cross-pollination a lot of times of people who are in one organization and they join the other. So that's something else to keep in mind as well. People had multiple memberships, and we will discuss why a little bit later. Another major organization from the 19th century down to the 20th is the Knights of Pythias with the Reverend Thomas Stringer. Stringer is a perfect example of what I mean by people who joined several organizations. Thomas Stringer was a very important Prince Hall Mason as well, having been the first Grand Master of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio, and later the first Grand Master of the Stringer Grand Lodge of Mississippi, which was in fact named after him as well. And so I definitely encourage you all to, especially people from the Deep South, to look into the Knights of Pythias. You've also got the True Reformers organization as well. This is a great example of an organization that is established with a certain moral or political purpose. The True Reformers have initiation rituals and whatnot, similar to the other organizations. But one of the biggest things that they were into was pushing the idea of temperance. They wanted their members not to drink or purchase any type of alcohol whatsoever. And so that was something that was very important in during this period. And you see their founder here in William Washington Brown as well. United Order of True Reformers was headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. So any Virginia folks, you may want to look into them, especially since we know that they left a pretty good paper trail with newspapers, books, etc. As well. Now, fraternalism and African American genealogists, how to study it and find relevant information. So there are several different techniques that I like to tell people to look at. One of the things that is really great about fraternal organizations is that they have standard operating procedures that are oftentimes offer a unique glimpse at the lives and experiences of the ancestors who held membership. So I like to use this image here because this is a perfect example of something that to the uninitiated eye, you would just look at this image and say, okay, this is somebody, he has all this regalia and stuff on, but what does it mean? Well, if you ever heard the phrase, put on your Sunday best, in the early era of photography, wearing your fraternal regalia would have been seen as a part of wearing your Sunday best. So this gentleman here who's unidentified, unfortunately, he's actually wearing the regalia of at least two different fraternal organizations. His apron represents that he's a Mason, but the collar around his neck actually is one that was commonly used by the United Brothers of Friendship, okay, which is another fraternal organization. He has a sash that goes across from his left shoulder to his right hip, okay. That may represent a third organization. This was a practice that was done in the early period of photography, but by the early 1900s, a lot of these fraternal organizations actually started to forbid their members from doing that because you were mixing the different groups. And they said, well, no, you're going to be one thing, be one. Don't start wearing everything. It looks crazy. And that's literally what they would say sometimes. But that helps us in the way because now I can kind of date this picture to say, okay, at least we know this is pre-1900. We're pretty sure. We can probably tell from other ways, but that's another avenue to let us know this picture is probably pre-1900 just based upon that one thing alone. Now, if we had more information like where he was from, his name, etc., we'd be able to go in and try to find what lodges, what organization was he in, are they in the newspaper, etc. Okay. Proceedings, official histories, documents. These are the things that I know that we as genealogists, we love, we crave to have things in writing. And fraternal organizations leave and have left a healthy amount of documentation if you know the right places to look. Why are these documents important? Well, proceedings not only will have the membership lists that a lot of folks would definitely love to see, but I often say don't just look at the fact and say, well, this person was in this lodge and that was it. Sometimes they may have been very involved. They may have left, particularly if they were any type of officer on a state level or anything like that, they may have left a report. There may be photographs in there. There may be issues where there was a lawsuit. There may be issues where somebody got suspended or somebody got reinstated. You never know the type of things that you will find in Grand Lodge or organizational proceedings. And another thing that's really important about fraternal organizations that oftentimes gets left out of the story is one of the reasons why they were so important is that, especially before the Great Depression, being a member of a fraternal organization was one of the surest ways that a person or a family would get insurance style benefits. The document that you see here, which says certificate, is actually a document from one of my relatives, okay, James Cook, who was a member of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama. I was actually with the Grand Master of that Grand Lodge prior to this webinar today, and so I give him a major shout out. But this is actually a document that one of my cousins has, because this was her father and her mother. Just really quickly, if we analyze it, we see that it's Tuskegee, Alabama, May the 21st, 1954. And I'll just read to you very quickly what it says. It says, to the worshipful master, wardens and brethren, so those are the top officers of this particular lodge, of Tuskegee Mill Lodge number 862, okay, of the ancient free and accepted Masons under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Alabama, located in Tuskegee, County of Macon, in the state of Alabama. I, James H. Cook, do consider myself to be of sound mind. I am 36 years of age, a member of Lodge 862, in good standing, and reside at, and he has his address there, the city, the state, and his wife's name is Elizabeth Cook. Now, if you didn't know, and you also see at the bottom, the witnesses are the worshipful master and the secretary of that lodge. Now, if you didn't know anything else about this person at all, you've got a spouse, you've got an address, you know what lodge this person is in, you've got some associates, because you know these other two men at the bottom left corner are members of that lodge. You've got a good trail. You've got some good breadcrumbs to pick up the trail of who was this man, just off this one document, because he's leaving insurance benefits to his wife, which also, when those were paid out, those would have been documented as well, how much money and maybe where he was buried, right? So these are all tantalizing clues that you're not going to necessarily find in the census, okay? Moving forward, here's some other things to look out for in Grand Lodge proceedings. Organizational hierarchy. So figure out, understand the parlance at least a little bit of, especially if a person is a member and they are an officer and they have some type of rank and title, what does that rank and title really mean? What were they doing? A lot of times they may have left a report to explain their activities to you. Also, I'm looking for membership rosters. These are the things that I know a lot of genealogists would love to get their hands on, and it's very possible. This actually is a document that says annual returns of subordinate lodges. This is actually from the Grand Lodge that I belong to, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of DC. Now, something that's really interesting about this one here is that it's for the year ending in December of 1890. Now, for you experienced folks out there, that 1890 should be really important, because we know that the majority of that census was destroyed, except for a few places. However, using fraternal documents, you may be able to still pick up the trail of what your ancestor was doing in, let's say, a year like 1890 or another year where you may not have a census for. And of course, we know the census is every 10 years, but most of these organizations are taking these type of records every year. So you may have the census for 1900, 1910, but a fraternal organization's document may help you still find that person through the years. And then you say, wait, they're not 1910 census, but in 1908 proceedings, it will say, well, brother such and such and such and such died. They moved. etc. These are the type of things that you can find in there. Okay. Also, you'll see communications from other states, districts, or maybe even other countries as well that your ancestor would have been involved in. But on the census, it may just say that, oh, this person was a baker, shoemaker, a salesman, or what have you, or they kept house. But in these organizations, they had real power, and they were more than just what the census may have called them. Okay. So we've already touched a little bit on identifying regalia and fraternal remains. This is an image of a gentleman from the United Brothers of Friendship. A lot of folks will see this type of regalia and say, "Oh, this person was a Mason." They would, because that's kind of the most popular organization that for most modern people. However, I would encourage you to really try to analyze and find out what was this regalia. Was it from the Elks? Maybe they were from the Othos. Maybe there's multiple things on there. So just try to analyze those types of images as much as possible if you have them, or maybe even if you have regalia that's been passed down in your family, you definitely want to take a look at that. Rings, jewelry, these are other things, means of identifying various fraternal organizations. So if you have some pieces of jewelry, you may be able to take it to your local jeweler or local fraternal organization, and people may be able to help you identify what this person was involved with. The same thing is true with headwear. Now, think about headwear a lot of times, which is really great for fraternal organizations, is as you can see there, a lot of times they will say the name of the group that the person was involved in. So you see various fezzes there, Oasis, Amara, right? I'm a member of Mecca Temple, so I have a fez that looks just like the ones on here, except mine says Mecca Temple number 10. So when my grandkids come along, they don't have to guess where my shrine membership was, my Shriners temple. They can read it and say Mecca Temple number 10. Where was that? And they can kind of go from there. Okay. Aprons. Aprons are another great way of identifying where a person's membership was, as well as some of the accomplishments that they may have made. Now, as someone who's uninitiated to these type of things, you may or may not be able to recognize and say what this was or what this wasn't. However, it does help to be able to, whether you look it up online, whether you go find your local, in this case, Masonic Lodge or the Elks Lodge, what have you, to try to get a better understanding of who was your ancestor in this part of their life and what was it that they were doing. Okay. Group photos. Group photos can also be amazing. I mean, I know we love photos just as much or maybe even more than we love documents, right? So looking at these type of images and trying to figure out, okay, well, where's my ancestor? Who else is in the image? Where was this taken? What's the context of it? What were they trying to represent? Okay, these are very, very important things to consider as well that have been passed down to us. Now, here's where one aspect that I really love to talk about, which is cemeteries. Fraternal organization membership is very important to a lot of members, well, to most members, so much so that a lot of us will take that to our graves. So we see this first image, this person was a member of both the Masons and the Oddfellows. So they made sure they wanted that represented in their final resting place. Okay. There very likely would be an insurance policy or something attached to that allowed them to put this on there. It's very possible. Okay. Many people would join these organizations for burial benefits as well as for other type of medical insurance benefits, as I mentioned earlier. The woodmen of the world, as you see here, and the American woodmen, they were very famous for these headstones that were fashioned to look like tree trunks. And if you were to study their ritual, which I have not read in full, but there was probably something in there about the strength of a tall tree, and then the fact that it was cut down to be an allegory about the life of this person. Okay, so try to understand not just what they were a part of, but what was the context, what was the message that they were trying to convey to the future generations that would come and observe this particular grave site. Okay. So before we get into Q&A, I just want to say a little bit about my story, and then we can kind of go forward from there. But this is me. Way back in 2015, when I was 25 years old. I became a member of Corinthian Lodge number 18, and I became a full-fledged Mason, a full master Mason. And at the time, I was very unaware of how deep my actual connection was to fraternal organizations. how, and I actually thought I was doing something kind of original, but I would soon realize that I wasn't. As I mentioned earlier, I interviewed my great grandfather 7 years to the day before he passed. And this is the image of myself. The man in the blue is my maternal grandfather, and the man in yellow is my great grandfather. Now I knew that all three of us happened to be Masons. I knew that, but that I don't get any points for that because both of these men at the time were living. The thing that was really fascinating to me, though, was that I found out from this interview with my great grandfather, who, by the way, both of these men are also members of Alpha Phi Alpha, and my great grandfather was a member of the Elks Lodge in his hometown as well, which they're from Dothan, Alabama. Very fascinating history. I asked my great grandfather, I said, "Well, Granddaddy, how did you get involved in all this fraternal stuff? What made you get into the Masons and whatnot?" And he told me, he said that his father and his father-in-law had actually brought him into the Masonic Lodge. At the time, I had no idea. And this is the two of them. I had no idea that my great-great-grandfathers were also members of the same lodge as my great-grandfather. They, in fact, had brought him in to Prince Hall Masonry, the same organization that I joined in 2010. I had no clue, but I was able to verify it, not just because my great-grandfather told me, but also because that same day I got to go visit the cemetery where my great-grandfather, Porter Griffin, who you see there, his wife, Alma, where they are both buried. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, Masonry or the Eastern Star meant so much to them that they actually had it imprinted on their headstones when they each passed. Okay, I was able to verify, thanks to the grand historian, my counterpart down in Alabama, who actually gave me documentation that both of these people were not only members of the Alabama organization or jurisdiction, as we would call it, but that they were both financial at the time of death. Therefore, they got these headstones. So now I understand a little bit about how they were spending their money. I understand so many other things about them just based on that one fact alone. Okay. Now the story for me got deeper because I would find out Grandma Alma right there, who you see here, her grandparents, who you see depicted here, grandfather Joseph McBride. Now this is his family along with Grandma Jane. Granddaddy Joseph was actually the first Prince Hall Mason in my family's history, and I would later find out that Grandma Jane was actually a member of the Order Eastern Star chapter, and that they actually started it together. Okay, I was able to document this. I was fortunate enough that I was actually helping the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama to digitize their proceedings and their records. And lo and behold, I found this image here, the bottom image of from the proceedings of the membership of Myrtle Lodge 162 in Spring Hill, which is just outside the city of Troy. And I found my grandfather, Joseph McBride's name there, listed as the treasurer. This document is from 1911. But lo and behold, if you look at two names above him, 2 rows above him, you'll see the name of Toby Townsend, who was the son-in-law of his, who was also my 3 times great-grandfather. So I've got my 4 times great-grandfather and my 3 times great-grandfather, members of the same lodge on the same document, the same page. Okay, and that lodge, the original building, which you can see here, is still standing, which sits next to Elam Missionary Baptist Church, which is where Granddaddy Joseph and several members of this side of my family are actually buried. Okay, and there's several other connections that I can make, but in the essence of time, I'll spare you unless anyone wants to ask in the Q&A. But the fact is, I was able to trace back all the way to a person who was in my family who had been actually born into slavery. Okay, many of these men were born in slavery that you see in this document, but who was a founding member of his Masonic Lodge and the Eastern Star chapter. And there's so many other things that I was able to flesh out from that one fact alone. Okay, but the story does not end there for me. This is another ancestor of mine, Reverend William J. Hightower. Reverend Hightower was an AME minister who was born in 1868. He was a member of a lodge in Dothan as well, the same city where my grandfather resides, and my great-grandfather was. Reverend Hightower was an AME minister, and one of the things that was really interesting to me was that the first lodge in the city of Dothan was known as Zion Fountain Lodge number 54. That's where my great-grandfather was. That's where his father and father-in-law had brought him into. But in researching some more of this history, I found out that there had been other lodges established, particularly this one, Fairview 513, which I said, well, why did they establish another lodge when they already had Zion Fountain? Well, one thing that I realized was Reverend Hightower was a minister in the AME church, and you see here Reverend J.M. Dixon, who's the WM, the worshipful master of this particular lodge. He's the head of one of the biggest Baptist churches in the city at the time. Matter of fact, most of these men were the leading clergy of the Black citizens of the city of Dothan during this period. I said, oh, these guys are associating with each other based upon the fact that these are the religious leaders. And sometimes you will find that people who, I know one lodge that we had here in DC that was full of people, of the Black employees of the Smithsonian Institute from the early days of when they started employing Black people. Okay, so sometimes, so you will make these type of connections in doing this type of research that you won't necessarily find on the census. These people didn't necessarily live next door to each other, but they chose to associate for various reasons, personal, business, religious, and otherwise. Okay, and so kind of just moving forward, what you'll understand about, or what I hope you understand about fraternal records, is that they are very, very important sources of information. Some of the great places that you can find that type of history would be the Iowa Masonic Library. There's also the Indiana University has just opened their Center for American Fraternalism collection as well. And I also want to encourage you all, if you're inclined, to check out the book that I wrote, The Lost Empire, Black Freemasonry Old West. It focuses quite a bit on Kansas, but also other states of the Old West, such as Missouri, Colorado, Texas, Arkansas, as well. But this book was written out of a search to help one of my colleagues, Denisha Swanigan, to research her family's fraternal history. And it ended up changing not only her family history, but the entire understanding that I had of the history of Black America in the Wild West. And so if you get a chance to check the book out, I definitely will. You can get a copy of it from jamesrmorgan.com. I can put that in the chat if anybody would like to check that out. So with that being said, I'm going to stop here. And if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to entertain them.
Well, thank you, James. That was fascinating information. And yes, there are some comments and some questions. And of course, people can still add to there, and you can come off the camera if you'd like as well. But Marianne,
it's saying that I'm unable to start to. It's saying I don't have the ability to do my video for some reason.
Oh, okay. Well, we're looking at a very handsome picture of you anyway. Okay.
Thank you.
Because I don't know how else to do it, except it just shows you. Maybe I can unclick something. And nope, I don't know. So I'm going to proceed on with the Q&A. And as I mentioned throughout your talk, that this session was recorded. And so it will be placed at a later date on the YouTube channel for the International African American Museum. So Marianne says, when I was 6 years old, my mother returned from a funeral of her father, and in describing it to me, mentioned that he was wearing the Mason's apron in the casket. I have not explored this aspect of his life. He was a land-owning farmer in Edgecombe County, North Carolina. Are there records that I could access to learn more about his Masonic lodge? Burial was in 1943. And my dear grandpa was George Bullock, born in 1855, enslaved.
The answer to that is yes. And I'm assuming that Mr. Bullock was African American, but either way, the answer is yes. The question is how, right? So I can tell you specifically when you're talking about North Carolina, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of North Carolina has a very, very, very good collection of their proceedings, as well as a really great history book actually as well, at their their headquarters down in North Carolina. I forget what city it is, but if you go online and just check out the Prince Hall Grand Lodge in North Carolina, you can just reach out to them. I'm actually friends with their grand historian as well, and but they have darn near all of their actual proceedings from the year 1871 forward, which is really quite amazing. Kind of when you think about it. Like unfortunately, well, you can't see me, but I actually have some of those proceedings myself. I was kind of just trying to flip through real quick to see if I could see anything. I found a GW book, but it wasn't an Edgecombe. But long story short, I would definitely reach out to them. Another great place to go, as I mentioned, was the Iowa Masonic Library, which I can drop that link in the chat if you like. The Iowa Masonic Library houses the biggest collection of specifically Masonic, but they also deal with other fraternal organizations as well. But the Iowa Masonic Library has the largest collection of Masonic and fraternal records in the country. They actually do have an online search tool called as well, which I'm gonna place in the chat here for you as well. And you can search their catalog like you would do for any other for any other library. And also one thing about them that I love is that if you call them and let them know what you're looking for, if you can try to specify a year and a stage of what type of thing you're looking for, they will actually help you research and for a small fee, even scan in and email you the documents if they don't have them scanned already. And it's actually great if they have them scanned already because they actually will send it to you for next to nothing. They already have it digitized.
Okay. Treva Mack says, was there a statewide or national level agency that local orders were accountable to or required to provide reports? Our local lodge shut down after losing their building, and I'm wondering what happened to all of their papers or photos.
Well, the simple answer is yes, but I would answer that question with the question, which organization are you referring to? But the simple answer would be yes. Typically, when an organization goes through a situation where they are no longer able to function, their documents and whatnot are supposed to have been turned over to their Grand Lodge or what have you. There's different names. So if you have a specific organization that you're thinking about, then I would try to contact that organization that's in existence today, or their heirs, depending on what the group is. Now, if it's like a Masonic lodge per se, the Grand Lodges, all still exist in every state. So reaching out to them, trying to find out who's their historian. Many of these lodges and Grand Lodges actually have libraries, which a lot of folks don't know and don't take advantage of, but a lot of times they do. And for someone who's an outsider, it can be intimidating, I think. But what you can do is you say, hey, listen, I'm just researching my ancestors, researching the community, trying to find out who was a member of this organization, and you never know what you'll find. So I'm not sure I hope that helps. I'm not sure what
Yeah, I think that helped.
or where.
I think that helped a lot. And Treva, if there's follow-up to that, you can, just put it in the Q&A or the chat session, which you touched on the next question a little bit, because one of the attendees is saying, are the fraternal records scattered in libraries? So I'm going to assume they're meaning public libraries by location throughout the United States also. Where would I begin with that?
Sure.
James.
So actually, yeah, you'll be surprised. You actually can find things of that nature in public libraries. Sometimes the rare book collection or the local or genealogy-based collections as well, but they may not have a comprehensive collection. One of the best places I would go for this type of history also is looking at your local newspapers. Not so much today, but when you go back about a century or more, it was very common in local newspapers to publish the happenings of the various lodges and chapters and whatnot, especially when it came down to elections. It was very, very, very important that everybody in town knew that Dr. Shelley Viola Murphy has just been elected as the most ancient grand matron of the Sisters of the Forest, and everybody needs to know because she's throwing a big to-do ball or what have you at the local union club. You'll find these type of documents a lot of times in the newspapers and whatnot as well. And so, and a lot of librarians I find, especially ones who are very vested in the local history, a lot of times they may actually know and say, "Oh yeah, but we had this organization here, we had that," and maybe they still exist, and you're just not aware of it. But I would definitely utilize your local library as well, for sure.
And just as a side note from myself, we're talking about public records and things like that, libraries. What about historical societies and what about churches? Would any
Yes.
of them have any type of records that someone could search for, to find out if they're a member of a lodge or organization? So any other records besides the ones you mentioned in the presentation?
Yes, yes. Historical societies are definitely a great place to check out as well, because you're kind of getting people who are more specific, even if they're amateurs or experts, but they're very focused on researching the history of this particular county or this township, or what have you. So definitely a great place. As far as churches go, I hadn't thought about that, but I will say this: a lot of times, especially in the South, churches might have fraternal organizations inside them in of themselves. We don't think about some of these groups today, but there's a really great documentary about one. It was called I want to say it's called The Ghost of Fairfield or something like that. And it's about this church in Alabama that has a fraternal society within it, and it's about how this society is struggling to maintain itself in the modern day, so to speak. So especially in situations like that, you can definitely find some really great stuff that oftentimes has been ignored, just sitting in the church library that people don't know, may not know what to do with, but they may very well have some things.
Good. Elise's question is, have you heard of the Knights of Peter Cleaver and Ladies
Mhm.
Auxiliary, a Catholic fraternal organization?
Absolutely, I absolutely have. Knights of the Flavor are a group that came into existence because the Catholic Church for a long time has um, made it taboo, so to speak, for Catholics to be members of the Masonic order. Okay. And so because the golden era of fraternalism comes into existence in the um, the period between the Civil War and the Great Depression is known as the golden era of American fraternalism. A lot of times Catholics were being left out or were leaving themselves out. I would say. So what the church does, they come up with the Knights of Columbus for whites, and the Knights of Peter Claver are formed for Black Catholics because Peter Claver was a Catholic minister who was teaching slaves. I think he was down in Brazil or somewhere, about reading Jesus and what in the Catholic faith. And so this is a fraternal organization for Black, specifically designed at the time for Black Catholics. So if you find a name of somebody, if you have somebody in your family, I'm sorry, what her name was? What did you say, Emma? What's her name?
Elise?
Oh, Elise, I'm sorry. So Elise, if you have somebody whose name is linked to Knights of Peter Claver, I'm gonna assume that they're African American, maybe not, but I'm pretty sure that person's Catholic. And so now
Mhm.
what a person like me does, if you have a newspaper article or some regalia, now I want to find out what parish, what cathedral, what church are they involved with, what's the name of the knights commandery that they're a part of, or the lodge that they're a part of that would have been in existence. Now you have something to go on to contact them with and say, hey, did we all ever have a Knights of Peter Claver group that met here or in this area somewhere? And before you know it, you find a wealth of things. I'm going to chat also to a Facebook group that I run, that I co-administer called Our Sacred Orders. And one of the other co-founders, his name is Jari Honore. He's down there in Louisiana. He's probably
Mhm.
the leading expert that I know of alive today on the Knights of Peter Claver, because he's a member of it as well. So I would definitely reach out to him. And as a matter of fact, it's a sin and a shame that we don't have Jari's book just yet, but we need it. But we're going to get it. We're going to get him to get his book out because we need that history.
Great. Will you type Honore's the spelling
Sure.
of his name? And we just got a couple more. Camilla says, is there, and you kind of addressed a little bit of this a minute ago, is there any connection between specific orders in religious denominations? Example, AME church members that often join Prince Hall.
Yes. Sometimes those things are intentional. Like, as I mentioned with the Knights of Peter Claver, I could not be a member of Knights of Peter Claver because I'm not. I don't have ever been a Catholic. Um, sometimes it's unintentional. Like the person recognized that there is definitely a historic tie between Prince Hall Masonry and the AME Church. However, every Prince Hall Mason is not AME. But there's a very, very strong tie between the two because early on in the history, Bishop Richard Allen, who's the founder of the AME denomination, he's one of the first Black Masons in Philadelphia, along with Absalom Jones. And so the AME Church helps that organization to spread over space and time, but it wasn't exclusively AME. There are organizations like Knights Peter Claver and others that you specifically have to be a Baptist. You have to be a member of our church
Right.
so you can join this particular group and get these benefits, etc. So it depends on the group that you're talking about.
Okay. Next one this is from Antonia. Were African American members of white Masonic lodges in Alabama in 1950s?
No, not a single one. Matter of fact,
Okay.
the Grand Lodge of Alabama, the predominantly white one, just they only had their first Black member within the past 10 years.
Okay. Okay.
So, no.
And so Lena says, my lineage is from West Indies. My grandfather, first great grandfather, and second great grandfather were master masons. They were all carpenters. My grandfather migrated to the USA with fake documents after traveling the world on steamships, called himself a shipbuilder. He was a member of the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America. How can I find out the PH he was part of and a sister organization?
Wow, that's a lot. So the person
That's a lot. And if I need to read it again, let me know.
Yeah, so the ancestor came to America illegally, and
Basically,
they said they were a member of a lodge.
a Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America.
Okay, so the Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America is not something that I'm specifically familiar. I'm specifically knowledgeable in the history of, but I do know one thing. I know they still exist.
Okay.
And so I would definitely be reaching out to them to try to find out. Now that's again going kind of more into like the trade union type of avenue, so to speak. But I know they still exist, and so I would definitely be reaching out to them. And if you have any documentation or anything, I don't know the person's name or what have you, but whoever, if you have any documentation or anything to go off of, I would lead with that, and kind of see where it takes you. I'd be interested
And
to find out
also,
about that.
I would also add in there, just go local with that information. If you know where he was at, you heard James mention the libraries, okay, some church affiliation and things like that. I definitely would look at the local level and find if there's even books written about this organization and any people that were involved. And I think the point of the sister organization will come up in any of that reading that we find. Okay, we definitely only got a couple more. So please excuse, this is Camille, and please excuse if you already mentioned this, but are you familiar with, or did you mention an organization called the Odd Fellows? My grandfather and his friends in Sumter, South Carolina were Black members of this group. Any reflections on this group and its origins, history, and etc. in African American communities?
Yes,
I did
mention. Yes, I did mention the Odd Fellows before. The Odd Fellows, the full name for the African American Odd Fellows was the Grand United Order of Odd Fellows, or is, because they still do exist. The white group actually in America broke off because they called themselves the Independent Order of Odd Fellows, because they were very upset that the English were starting to allow Blacks to join in the 1840s. So that's something to note. Another thing to know about the Odd Fellows, which is quite interesting, is that there was a time when the Odd Fellows were kind of known as the poor man's Masonry because their dues were usually cheaper than being involved in a Masonic lodge per se. But I often tell people the difference between these organizations is like Burger King versus McDonald's.
Right.
They all trying to tell you this a better cheeseburger, but it's just a cheeseburger, right? So you have that. Another thing that's interesting about each one of these organizations, as I mentioned earlier, is really looking at those insurance records. I found a really great story in Kansas City, Missouri, where the Missouri Black fraternal organizations came together and basically entered into a non-compete agreement that the Masons would offer this type of insurance, while this other group would offer burial insurance. Another group would have workman's comp, what we call workman's comp today. So these are groups that are really, really pioneering economics, insurance benefits. I mean, and the OPFOs were definitely a part of that. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Fascinating family history. One of my family's probable enslavers was a charter member of the Masonic Lodge number 242, 1857 to 1864 in Otago or Coosa County, Alabama, where are good places to check for records on this Masonic order. And then there's a side question: where did you find the Time magazine cover of Alex Haley and LeVar Burton?
So the answer to the first question is, again, I would just contact the Grand Lodge of Alabama. And I would just give them a call.
Yeah.
I know that their proceedings exist. Another great place that I know for a fact would have that information is it's a place called the House of the Temple, and I can put that in the chat as well. House of the Temple Library here it's actually here in Washington, D.C. They actually house the first public library in DC was actually a Masonic library, and it's still publicly accessible. I know for a fact that they have that they collect the proceedings, particularly of the predominantly white Grand Lodges and organizations. I know that because I've been there several times, so a dozen times probably. And so I would definitely contact them. Larissa Watkins, who's there, head librarian, she's wonderful. And so if you're looking for something like that, I would definitely reach out to them and check them out.
Okay, and it looks like we got just two more.
No
And from Alvin, he says, are you familiar with Bishop Richard Allen's Masons? Are they part of the Prince Hall Masons?
I'm assuming that Alvin is referring to Richard Allen Lodge, maybe, because I know of at least two Richard Allen Lodges that are Prince Hall affiliated lodges. I know of one in Pennsylvania. I think there's one in Florida, but I'm assuming that's what he's talking about, and if he is, then yes.
Okay. And Geraldine says, would James put the website in the chat for the Iowa Masonic Library? They said they didn't see it posted. And I don't know if, I think you mentioned it.
I did put it in there, but I can put it in there again. It's not a problem.
Okay. And Treva, who asked the question, she mentioned, and this was earlier, it was an Elk Lodge that she was posted about, regarding her question. And Lena mentioned came back with Baltimore, Maryland. And so we got that too. And James, I believe that is all. I want to thank you for being here and bringing this wealth of information that you have shared today. And I want to thank you again to those that. Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. You know what? I'm sorry, y'all. So I'm looking in the chat, and I want to thank Nolaway Hill for notifying me. I was putting them in the chat, and I didn't realize that it was going to host and panelist, not to everyone.
Okay.
So we can just give me 1 second.
Can we transfer them over?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I apologize, everybody.
Okay.
That blame my head, not my heart. So I put in the links in there for the Grand Lodge.
Great catch, Nolaway.
Yeah, Nolaway, thank you. I put a link in there for the Iowa Masonic Library for anybody who's interested in purchasing a copy of my book. There's a link in there for Our Sacred Orders, which is the Facebook group that I run as well. And I also want to make sure because as I mentioned earlier, the Indiana University, they have a new center for fraternal collections and research as well. And I know the folks there. I've known them. The people who work there I've known since before they actually had this center. And I definitely, hold on just one second, want to make sure that you all have access to that as well. Hold on, just give me
You
1 second.
also have a link in there. Oh, you put in a Facebook page. I'm going through here now. Information about your book, jamesrmorgan.com. That's there. And you got some accolades, lots of information, great
Oh,
event.
thank you.
Yes. And again, Noliway, thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah. And I hope
in the chat.
I hope whoever ML Ellington asked me about researching somebody from Troy, Alabama. My mom's paternal side goes back to Troy, so I hope that they'll contact me. You can reach me to my website or what have you. But I definitely hope
You're also on Facebook too.
I am on Facebook as well. Yes, absolutely. So I hope that they'll reach out to me. I'm curious to know what family, who are you researching in Troy? You never know. See this is how we make these connections, right?
Could be connected, huh?
Could be. I mean, look, I'll tell you just one quick story real quick before we go.
Sure.
When I was looking at Granddaddy Joe McBride's lodge, there's a father and son in there. Both of them is Jefferson Youngblood Sr. and Jefferson Youngblood Jr. Well, come to find out, some type of way these people were related. I don't know how, but they were related. I can prove that through DNA because I'm finding descendants of the Youngbloods who are connected to me and my mother and my brother. And I'm like, wait a minute, these guys were related. And I would not necessarily know to look for them had it not been for fraternal records. So you never know. So Mr. and Miss Ellington, I'm not sure, but reach out to me because I'm definitely curious to know who it is that you're researching down that way.
Mm-hmm. And Mary Clark said she's going to Geneva and Coffee County, Alabama tomorrow for a research trip. But best of luck on that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Camille says, excellent and informative presentation. Proud of my HU grad. P.S. I used to work at Moreland Spinnyard Center there. I'm sure you must have utilized the storehouse of valuable historical information.
Absolutely. Well, Moreland Spinnyard is actually a great place because for anybody who's interested in DC, and I don't know how I left this out, but as the grand historian for the District of Columbia, we actually have housed our fraternal collection at Moreland Spinnyard since I think 1987, which I have the honor of managing. So if you're looking at anything DC related, please feel free to reach out to me as well for that. I'm also going to drop another link real quickly because if you're looking at, I know we have a lot of Louisiana folks out there. The Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Louisiana, they actually have their collection at the Amistad Research Center as well. So I would definitely recommend that. And the list goes on and on, y'all. So I say get to it. You know, I look at myself as someone. I'm trying to ring the bell and let people know that this information is out there. I can't do it all, but I'm trying to ring the bell and let people know the information is out there and is available.
And April also comments that she used to work at Moodland Springyard. That was her work study job. And, and again, outstanding presentation. You got some great accolades. And Camilla said the bell rung. Yeah, so the bell rung. So thank you all for coming, and keep watch out for what's on the Facebook page for the Center for Family History. Also look at the International African American Museum. As I stated, this presentation was recorded and they will be putting it up on the YouTube channel for the International African American Museum.